Hey, welcome everyone back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 103, Geopolitics. I'm here with my co-facilitator, Lionel.
Hello everyone, how you all doing? How you doing today, Mike?
Doing good, brother, yourself?
I'm well, thanks for asking.
All right. If you want to follow along, the docket is in the description below the video. Hit the like button as you come in. And we will get started with the first video. So this first one is from Tunacheki. Why Africans love Donald Trump, or why Donald Trump is popular in Africa. Um, I find this video interesting because Donald Trump hasn't stepped foot in Africa not once since he's been in office. He also hasn't stepped foot in Latin America only until recently in Argentina for the G20 summit. But outside of that, he hasn't been there. He's been to the Middle East more times than he's been to any part of Africa remotely. So um, Africans' view of Donald Trump is extremely interesting because here's a man who craps on the continent, hasn't been there, and Africans love him. What's your take on this? I know. I know. Are you there? All right. While Lionel is getting himself together, let me give further analysis on this. Um, there is a strong contingent of Africans who I know you have something to say.
I just broke up a little bit there. Yeah, yeah, I think I'm breaking up. I'll mute myself.
All right. Um, there's a strong contingency of Africans who love Donald Trump, and we see as we see in the video right here, with his thick accent, love Donald Trump. They love his swagger and everything else, but at the same time, Donald Trump doesn't love Africans. Doesn't love Africa at all, the continent. So it's interesting to see how Africans' love for Donald Trump is different than African Americans' view of Donald Trump, right? So a strong contingency in the United States of black African Americans have very little interest in Donald Trump. 15% of black men who uh, voted for Trump. So Trump got a strong contingency of voters than Mitt Romney did in 2012 when he ran against Obama. And what you see is this love affair with westernized culture, American culture especially. Africans love American culture. They love black culture too, right? So they love the hip hop. They love the R&B. That you see them, trying to rap or trying to sing R&B or trying to mimic a lot of what we consider to be black culture, right? Black American culture. Hip hop is black American culture, and what you see is a lot of Africans trying to copy that outside of the United States. I've heard stories from other groups of women who say that African guys try to pass as African American with their thick accent, and it doesn't really work. So they're not interested in that, right? You're basically a fraud for the lack of a better description. And Africans don't really embrace their own culture on the ground. They seem to be trying to embrace European culture, white American culture, for the most part, or even black culture as a final fallback when it comes to the cool factor.
All right. Hello, am I coming in clearly?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Show a map. Most of the countries that support Donald Trump come from Africa. I forgot who. I think it was Pew Research Study. And in the video, it was also much of the Africans that like Trump really don't know him as a person in terms of how Black Americans do. And a lot of people don't even know who the president of America is. I think that most of the people who say that they like Trump only like him because he says whatever's on his mind, good or bad, no matter how you think about it, he says what's on his mind. And that's why a lot of Africans like him, including the African guy with the MAGA hat on. He said he liked Trump because he says A is A is A is A, but you vote for somebody else, they'll say, and once they say, so I think that's why a lot of Africans say that they like Trump. Now, that's not to say all of them may know what kind of person he is like that, but I also agree with you that affair with Western culture, they changed their names to Western names. They practice Western everyday life culture, but everything you said is true. They may not want to hear it, may not want to admit it, but without saying it, they love Western culture. Um, Not all, but more than enough. Mm, yeah. So that was a good video.
Yeah, and then when you really go to, if you really look at Africa now, you see, African men, they drive around in their European cars, in their European suits, and gold rings here and baguettes and bracelets there, and you know, um, they've been educated through the European system, and then the way their view of life is a lot different. Their relationship with pale skinned people is a lot different than our view, right? So black people in America came out of slavery, so there's an adversarial relationship between black people and white people in America, whereas Africans come here and they embrace and swallow and drink the Kool-Aid and become intoxicated off of American culture. So they're embracing things that typically in Africa they would be shamed for, at least by the ancestors. Uh, and so even in America, they're not really down for Black Lives Matter until something happens to them. Amadou Diablo or some other African, gets hemmed up by the police. Now all of a sudden we all in this together. But when things are going well for them, when they go into these PWIs, which are predominantly white institutions, then all of a sudden things are just fine. I don't see anything wrong with you
Right.
know the system or anything like that. Or you black people in America are just lazy, and you should you know be happy that you're here. You're not in Africa or something like that. Well, they would be happy if there was equal treatment under the law, under the guises of the law. So
And and everything you're saying is true. And there is also an infatuation with of Black American culture. It absolutely is. But again, if you point it out, there's major disagreement. And I agree with you. If an African here in America gets in trouble with um, the law, then yes, we're all in this together. And even without them saying we're in all this things together, it's Black Americans that come to their aid. But at the same time, they're the ones, not all, more than enough, helping oppress us in some type of way. Telling us we're no good, in there aggy us. It's us has to, but yeah, in my opinion, that's why I love because here.
I know you're breaking up a whole lot. I know, are you there? Okay, he's gone. We'll move on to the next article. So peace to everyone in the chat. Yeah. So this next article is from the Inquisitor. .com. Major State Department report says Jamal Khashoggi's problems began not when he criticized Saudis, but when he criticized Trump. Have we been missing something? All these pop-ups. Man. I'll read the first couple paragraphs. There has been a lot of speculation about the possible reasons that led the Saudis to kill Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi's. But one thing which has remained constant is the understanding that his falling out with the Saudi administration took place because of his criticism of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But now, a major report issued by the State Department seems to suggest that Khashoggi's problems first arose not because he criticized the Saudi leadership, but because he criticized Donald Trump. Jamal Khashoggi was forced to flee a Middle Eastern nation in 2017 after he reportedly feared for his life because of his writings. He moved to the United States and began writing for the Washington Post last year, with many of his columns arguing that social reforms that Mohammed bin Salman (MBS) was so keen to project to the Western world were actually masking the Wahhabi nation's continual practice of choking dissent. But according to Newsweek, it was not his direct criticism of MBS, which was the root of his first troubles, but a column that he supposedly penned for Saudi newspaper Al Hayat, which never saw the light of day due to the political pressure. It was 6 months after he wrote the column that Khashoggi fled Saudi Arabia. The column had seen the journalist questioning Trump's contradicting geopolitical stance. While the American president pledged that he would be a bitter rival to Iran during his election campaign, Trump's support for Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and Russian President Vladimir Putin was completely at odds with what he was preaching. So this is interesting. Um, this sounds really to me as if they're trying to pin Khashoggi's murder onto Trump by saying basically that basically that he said something nasty about Trump, and Trump didn't like it, so he basically got Khashoggi whacked, and that's enough for a president, for an impeachment. This is just my initial understanding of this article. Anybody else have anything different? Am I the only one talking? Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Hey,
you. I
hey,
got
hey.
some background noise.
Okay, hey, hey. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Hey, what's going on, everyone? So, Mike, I wanted to kind of follow up on your point there. So this is the narrative that they're now making out with regards to Khashoggi's assassination. That this was somehow now like a kind of like a Trump hit piece.
Yeah, it sounds to me. It's all the feedback in the background. What's going on, Paul Bryant? Um, it sounds to me that let me mute. Yeah, it sounds to me that Khashoggi may have written a piece criticizing Trump's um unbalanced views in the Middle East, right? So the article is right in pointing out that Trump did support Assad in the beginning, and he said that Assad's not fighting, Assad is fighting ISIS, he's cleaning up, Syria, blah 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 blah, and the Russians are in there, handling business. He did say that in 2015.
He did. He did.
Now this is in stark contrast to his support for Saudi Arabia, because you cannot support Saudi Arabia and support Bashar al-Assad. You can't say, well, you know, um, Assad has to leave, and the Russians are killing ISIS, and then turn back around and support Saudi Arabia, while at the same time Saudi Arabia is actually funding the terrorists inside Syria.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, no. I was going to say no. That's kind of how I'm following this. That's why I was curious as to this narrative now that now Trump had something to do with this. Now I've heard in other circles that Khashoggi was actually a CIA asset. Now, do you know anything about this?
Yeah, he was definitely a CIA asset. He had close ties to the height of the kingdom. He's the cousin, if I remember correctly. He's he's in the top five of the family of the House of Saud.
Okay. So I mean, how? So I don't. Then what would be what would be the narrative of Trump essentially taking out a CIA asset? I don't understand. I'm not sure if I follow.
Well, he said some disparaging, according to the article. Allegedly, he said some disparaging things about Trump in an article that was not released, and it did not get released because there was pressure from the kingdom for him not to be releasing this sort of article. So
Gotcha. Gotcha.
that's when he left.
Right. Right. Because I know that the kingdom had issue with some of the things that he was actually putting in print. So okay.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And if this is the case, then what can happen here is they can take out MBS, and they can put it all on Trump as well. Because what it looks like, the optics in the media is that Trump is saying, "Oh, MBS is a great guy," and then if he did, we have big military contracts with him. We can't jeopardize that. You look like you're
I mean,
colluding with the.
he so much has said this though. He literally almost said just that.
Mhm,
Like, was it like 2 weeks ago, maybe a week or two ago? He kind of almost literally said that. Like,
mhm,
well, we do a lot of business with them, so hey.
mhm. Right, right. So if you take the optics and you look at how he's saying it, MBS being a bad guy, CIA is saying that MBS did it. Now you have the Senate. The Senate is saying, yeah, we think he did it. The Senate doesn't do any investigation, so how the hell would they know?
Right.
This is the same thing like RussiaGate, right? So when Trump got elected, they said, "Oh, the Russians hacked the election," and 17 state agent, 17 agencies within our government says that they did. Well, who were these 17 agencies? Who did the investigation? Who did the forensics?
Right. I was gonna say, and then how do you get to a point where you're doing like sort of like the macro investigation, and then you come to find out that 17 other agencies, right, supposedly found something, and yet nothing happened until there was this larger investigation, which found that these other 17 entities also found some funny business going on. I mean, that's kind of what makes me scratch my head with a lot of this stuff, especially with the whole thing of like Trump kind of, and I'm no, this isn't like by no means no Trump support or anything like that. I'm speaking objectively.
Mm-hmm.
It's Trump being assigned to having something to do with the taking out of essentially, which we've established as a CIA asset.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really trying to like parse the optics on all of that myself. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Right. Right, and one of the agencies that, out of the 17 is what the DEA. You mean the Drug Enforcement Agency has intel on Russia's collusion with Trump? Come on.
Right. Right. That's what I'm saying, dude. It's like there seems to be a lot going on here, right? And for 17 agencies to have some sort of intel on something, right? But this doesn't come out until after a larger investigation is done. I'm kind of like, okay, obviously we're not being told everything here.
Hmm.
Obviously.
Hmm. Right, and the only agency that does investigations is the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. They're the only ones who do it. You might have threat intelligence, do some cumulative work, but they don't actually do the full investigation. Only the FBI, which is threat investigation, and NSA, which monitors communications. Only they would know that. But NSA has not come out and said anything. In fact, NSA says we don't have sufficient information to determine that the Russians actually did commit any hacking. So how would they know anything about Khashoggi's murder?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because actually in all of this, you actually haven't heard anything from the NSA, have you?
Nope.
Huh. And you would think that they would probably be the one to know anything if there was anything to know.
Well, they would know about his iPhone and his Apple Watch.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to postulate too much, but just based on the nature of the article, yeah, I find that very interesting, man. Because when I had heard, I think this is like on an RT report where they had talked about Khashoggi actually being a CIA asset. I was like, whoa, wait a minute, this is interesting because if we're going to start to say that there's some sort of collusion or something within the U.S. government with all this, how does that fit if this guy was a CIA asset?
Mm. Well, asset could just be a very broad term, right?
Well,
So
that's
even
what I was gonna say. That is a broad term, right? Right.
right, because even the Boston bomber, the older brother, was a CIA asset in Russia. So that's why he ended up back in Boston. The Russians kicked him out.
Gotcha. Okay. Is Lionel there? Is he all good to go?
I think Lionel is
I'm here.
having major issues.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. There he is. Okay.
Yeah.
You have anything you want to add to Khashoggi's
Um,
article?
I it's kind of wow. I agree with what you said, and when you first said it, that it's like it seemed like they're trying to twist it around. Um, and upon listening to the both of you talk about it, there's seems like a lot of stuff that's not being said. That a lot of information we're not privy to. In this case, all we know that Saudi Arabia killed a journalist in Turkey, and a little bit of information how he was a CIA asset. But there's a lot of information that we're not privy to that we're trying to see. We're trying to read the tea leaves with not enough information. But
Not
everything,
without enough tea leaves.
right, without enough tea leaves.
Hmm.
And
Well,
it's, yeah,
if they could pin it on Trump, then what that could do is it could spell disaster for his 2020 election, his 2020 run.
Now, do you think that that's actually sort of like maybe like the underlying angle in all of this? Like this is maybe sort of like the impetus for setting the stage for just that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Because this is just a spanner wrench. You throw a spanner wrench into the cogwheel, then you jam up the operation, and then you're forced to actually dismantle the cogwheel to get the wrench out.
That's an interesting angle.
Hmm.
Okay, I mean, I don't have any more for this one, but yeah, we'll have to keep tabs on this one.
Hmm. All right, let's go to the next one. This one's from RT. Who in Russia not ditching dollar? Dollar moving away from Russia. So Russia had their annual conference called Russia Calling, which is an economic forum. And based on a question that was asked to Vladimir Putin, which is the president of Russia, he said that the question was asked, is Russia dumping the dollar and or ditching the dollar? And Putin said Russia is not ditching the dollar is ditching Russia. So basically, what he's saying is that the sanctions and the broken relationship is forcing the dollar to leave Russia rather than Russia ditch the dollar.
I like that answer.
Hmm. Right. So now Russia is forced to adopt different mechanisms to be put in place to actually do business with other countries that don't, involve the dollar because they don't have access to it because they've been marginalized and basically kicked off of the financial system, which is SWIFT.
Hmm. Now, did does the article touch on the countries that they are making these deals with?
Right. It mentioned just about everybody in that audience that you see right there, but it mentions that all the countries, Turkey, Syria,
Okay.
Iran, North Korea, all of these countries are actually looking for alternatives to the dollar because they've all been kicked off of it too.
Right. Right. Right.
Lining up
And I
everything.
mean, this is going to be a natural. This is just essentially a natural progression um, of this of the sort of like the this third world war, if you want to call it that. Right. I mean, in some ways, we can actually call it this. And this is also symptomatic of a lot of the trade war stuff that's going on. So there's got to be a lot of unilateral deals being done, right, with players that aren't actively involved or engaging the West.
Right.
I know.
now I'm starting to notice that Putin talks in. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
You good?
Hello,
We can hear you.
testing mic check. One, two, three.
You good? You good? I
Testing.
know. You good?
Hello, hello. Okay,
Uh oh.
all right. I'm starting to see that Putin talk. uh, Okay, I think there's a lag, but I'll try my best. I think starting to see that Putin talks in not direct terms. Because when I first saw the video, I didn't get it, but he, in a way, to do anything against rest on it. I've heard us and
Okay, Mike, is that Mike? Is that you in the back? I don't know. I hear something in the background there. Is that you, Mike?
No, I think that might be Lionel.
Okay. Okay.
let me yeah, let me try to restart. I'm getting like lag.
Okay. No problem. No problem. Okay, Lionel's gonna reboot.
All right. So essentially, let me mute Ulysses. But basically, what's happening right now is that everybody is looking for an alternative to the dollar because they can't do business with it. Not that, and the thing is, the dollar is strong right now, so it will behoove the United States to actually allow them to do business with the dollar because it's strong. But if you're trying to go to war with them, then sanctions is your first measure.
Well, I was gonna say, isn't this kind of like your catch-22 with all of this, right? Because you do have a strong dollar, but then at the same time, you've kind of set a situation globally where that strong dollar can't be leveraged, like globally speaking, right? You got a strong dollar, but at the same time, you've also frozen yourself out of certain markets, right? So you have a strong dollar, but you also kind of fucked yourself too.
Right, and Russia doesn't really do. They don't have a lot of exports to the United States outside of like Stoichia, vodka, and you know, and Russian women, right? They don't really have that much of an export to the United States.
Vodka, wait, vodka and women?
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, well, actually, you're right.
Russia doesn't really make anything. I mean, most of the stuff that the United States gets from Russia, it has to do with the space program and nuclear development.
Right.
So there's no real reason, there's no real export coming from Russia, but there's a lot of import that comes in from the United States and
Yeah.
Europe.
Particularly beef out of Texas. That's a huge import from Texas to Russia. Like all beef products. Yeah.
Well, now they get their beef from Latin America and
Oh.
in Africa now.
Interesting. Okay.
Now they used to get it from Europe, but because the European Union put sanctions on Russia over Crimea, they haven't been able to get any beef from there. So now the farmers in Europe are actually pretty ticked off because they have all these cattle and all this produce and product that they can't sell.
Similar to the pork farmers here in America that can't sell to China.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, what is one to do, right? When you have this going on globally, I mean, you ultimately are going to have to set up trade channels with partners that are willing, number one, willing to do trade with you, two, are friendly in terms of status with you, right? And it's kind of like we can't make these types of maneuvers with regards to like sanctions and all this type of stuff without considering what the repercussions could be. Like we have to consider, okay, well, if we place a sanction on Russia with regards to, these products or these exports here, then where would they go for the alternative? And if they go somewhere else for an alternative, would it actually be better? Would it be better for them in the long run? And if so, you may want to reconsider whether tariffs are going to actually work in your favor or not. And I'm not really sure if we considered these things largely. It seems like we didn't.
Right. Egypt has made out well based on those sanctions. Egypt supplies a whole lot of wheat and no, not wheat, but beef, the and other agricultural products to Russia. I think they have like a 280 million dollar deal on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't sound like a
Mm-hmm.
lot, but for somebody like Egypt, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot. I mean, you know, when you consider like say like what the GDP is for the United States versus someone like Egypt, right? To have a trade partner like Russia where you're exporting something considerable like beef, okay, it starts at $280 million. That's where it starts,
Hmm.
right? That next deal though, shit. Well, I don't know, doubles or triples, depending on if Egypt is not only able to meet certain like numbers in terms of supply numbers, but if they also have the ability to produce in excess, right? Russia is a large country.
Right, right, and they can just go to they can go to Latin America too, because I believe they struck a deal with Venezuela for some cattle as well.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say cattle, but more beef products and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I mean, like I said, man, it, 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 it makes sense on the Russian side, and then on the U.S. side, I think that you have to be far more mindful and strategic and nuanced if you intend on applying tariffs. If you want to try to like hit countries with tariffs and shit like that, then you might want to be very careful about that. No, there's not no.
All right, mic check 1, 2, 3.
You sound good, brother.
All right.
do you have anything you want to add?
What's the article?
Um, the article is really about Russia not ditching the dollar ditching Russia.
Oh, I don't know if you all heard what I said earlier, but that was basically all I had to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we was actually talking about import, export, and tariffs. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Complex brought up China and pork. There's a pork shortage, and they need pork. And I was saying in the chat that they need it for pork fried rice.
And other stuff. Uh, but
Oh,
yeah,
what?
uh, I forgot the name of the dish, but yeah, they do eat a lot of pork in their food. Pork buns.
Hmm.
Yeah, they not to make a joke about, but they do eat a lot of pork.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're definitely not Muslim. So,
That's a good point.
all right, let's move on to the next one. Come on. All right, this one is from CGTN. China, India reach positive results on boundary issue. Okay, so this video is basically talking about India and China coming to an agreement on the border that they share in between each other around that that part of the region and where they had conflict earlier in the year. And now that they can come to an agreement, what that's going to mean is that if they can squash this little issue of a border disputes, then they can also work together on other issues too. So you're talking about, I mean, because the whole purpose of the United States getting closer to India was to put pressure on China for this whole border issue. But if China and India has already um, squashed this whole entire problem of border disputes. What does the United States really offer at this point, and and what purpose does the United States really serve?
Uh, mm, they're talking about the Kashmir region, right?
No, no, this is in between. Um, this is in between China and India. They basically have a border that's 3 or 4 feet of distance between each other.
Wait. They they're having this entire conference over 3 or 4 feet.
Where do you demark your lines, right, for your border? How do you
Mm.
define your borders?
I mean, yeah, I
The
was gonna
way
say
the
because
way.
3 or 4 feet is subjective. That's subjective.
Mhm.
What's that, Mike?
No, I was just going to say that imagine if the United States took the border fence off the border between Mexico and the United States. How would you know where the line starts and where it ends?
Right.
Okay. Hmm. Okay. Okay.
So if they can figure this out, what I'm saying here is that they can. What's that complex? Yeah, if they can figure this out, then what they can do is they can actually take it to the next level because they're both part of the BRICS, and two, um, they need to figure out a compromise in between this. Now, China had the same issue with Russia, where they were encroaching on Russian territory in the 70s, and they almost came to a war over that. They actually came into a skirmish. They were actually shooting at each other. So they were able to squash that dispute as well. But that's that part was had something to do with Nixon going to China and actually putting pressure on the Soviet Union at the time through these border disputes.
Now, I was just gonna say, just by virtue of the fact that they are all members of the BRICS, that ultimately there were probably like some pre-treaties that had been put in play, right, which would ultimately lead to some sort of resolution, right, where they start negotiating the border down to the point where we get within 3 to 4 goddamn feet. Okay. And I'm pretty sure at that point, they're probably going to come to an agreement because there's too many trade deals on the table, right, that would enrich both countries. If they were to walk away from the table over 3 to 4 feet, it just really wouldn't make a whole lick of sense. So I kind of see this all as like as steps of progression to get to a point where they're going to get some sort of resolution on the table. Because given that they are all part of the same economic bloc, it only makes sense to do so.
Good point. And I'm going to throw in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Um,
Well, it doesn't actually go through India.
India is a port instead of the road, right?
I think that would be Pakistan.
Okay. Okay. All right.
I'm looking at the chat. Charlie Ross says I would somewhat disagree. The U.S. has already began moving their supply lines to Vietnam and Malaysia. Even AMD chips are made in Malaysia. It takes nothing to move cell phone development to Malaysia. But AMD chips were always AMD research was always done in Malaysia. That's nothing new. That's been like that for over 10 years. Um, the only reason they're in Malaysia because it's a lot cheaper and relative to India. Although India is cheap, Malaysia is actually a lot cheaper.
What was the? I think Christian sent something in the email circle here, literally today or yesterday or today about AMD. What was that? Do you guys recall what that article was about?
We covered that on Monday, and basically AMD has been taking market share from Intel.
Okay. Oh, okay. That was us about. Okay.
But yeah, AMD's always been making chips in Asia. That's nothing. And Shanghai has always been a big facility for AMD. That's been that way for 20 years. Um, let me read some other comments. China needs America's economy to be strong since the two are reciprocal at this point. This is coming from Paul Bryant. China holds the most U.S. Treasury debt. China is trying to get a seat at the global power table. That's a lot different from the acrimony that you think. Hmm. I know you have anything you want to add to it?
Go ahead, I know.
All right, repeat that one more time.
I'm reading from the chat. And
Okay.
Paul Bryant says China needs America's economy to be strong since the two are reciprocal at this point. China holds the most U.S. Treasury debt. He also goes on to say that China is trying to get a seat at the global power table. That is a lot different from the acrimony that you think.
Hmm. To be honest, I don't have any thing to say. I think you all um
Go ahead, Complex.
express points
Okay.
better than me.
I would say, okay, to that, I would say one, they're already at the table. They're already there, right? That's the first thing. I would already say that they're already at the table in terms of being a global power player. Two, I would also agree that they are holding U.S. debt. However, being in California, I'm seeing the creative ways that they're going about cashing in on it, given that the United States doesn't want to be cooperative in terms of its global economics, right? So we saw this demonstrated in some of the states that voted red. China directly hit their asses with tariffs. Okay. And then in places like California, you have a lot of wealthy Chinese buying up a lot of real estate, particularly commercial real estate. That's what's keeping the commercial real estate prices high here, right? It's a lot of purchasing and holding. You see, so I don't know. There's a few things that I see, kind of in between the lines that's taking place where the Chinese are kind of like, all right, well, if they don't really want to, adhere to, their obligations, then we'll kind of go about doing things the way we would like to do them.
Okay, Paul Bryant goes on again and says China and America are economic partners behind the scenes. Both nations need each other at this point for business. The supposed negativity towards each other is for public consumption.
I mean, they do. They absolutely do. I don't disagree with that. However, I would say though that I think the United States is being wholly disingenuous. I don't think this is just sort of like for like theater, right? I don't think this is like a dog and pony show. I think because when has like the United States or any sort of traditional Western power, I'm throwing that in quotes, when have they ever abided by any treaties that they've signed and did things in fairness? Never.
Yeah, ex Native Americans.
It's never happened, right? So I don't see why all of a sudden they would respect the Chinese. I think it's modus operandi, regardless who they're dealing with. I just think that the Chinese, I just think they're just more intelligent about how they're going to deal with Western powers, quite frankly. And so what we're looking at a different response to Western hegemony.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, anybody who has nuclear weapons is they already a global power. They may not project it, right? I mean, North Korea doesn't sail its warships all across these different oceans,
Right.
but they can hit you with from where they are. So you have to pay attention to what they're doing. You have to actually listen to what they're saying. Um, same thing with Israel. I mean, Israel doesn't have an aircraft carrier, but they do have power projection through political means. So anybody who has
Go ahead, Mike.
anybody anybody who has the capabilities for outreach, either through nuclear weapons or political outreach, I mean, he already has already has their seat at the table. China has a seat at the table for various amount of reasons. Economic development, manufacturing capital, nuclear weapons, power projection. They have 2 aircraft carriers and they're working on a third one.
And I think too also, and this is kind of why it's like, in my view anyway, China has to be taken far more seriously than the average American wants to give them credit for. Because, we do a lot of discussion about this in terms of like the role that China is playing with regards to, say, industries like the automotive industry, okay, where there's largely, we're looking at a crescendo effect or a pivot to an electrified platform. And who is going to play a major role in this? The Chinese. Okay, we've got billion-dollar battery manufacturing deals on the board with all of the major European manufacturers, right? In the same token, we've got Mr. President over here lobbying tariffs against European companies, right? See, so we're making the situation here easier, right, for the Chinese to assume the global position of world leader.
Mhm.
We're making it a whole lot easier for them.
All right. We'll actually move on to the next article. All right. So this next one is from Telesur. Venezuela president in Russia to meet Putin. So this is the first time, at least for this year, that Maduro, who is the president of Venezuela, is going to Russia, to Moscow, to meet Putin. So I believe he was there last year, but this is the first time this year that he's been there since the conflicts have began. Now, recently, the last week or so, he has actually met with uh, Turkish President Erdogan, Tayyip Erdogan, and he been talking some good deals on the table with Turkey. Now, why is Turkey inside Venezuela, which is halfway across the globe? We have to put that into perspective first. Um, Turkey is in need of oil. They do have an energy deal with Moscow, but that still hasn't taken a bold yet. And then you put on the table what Turkey can offer to Venezuela. Turkey has a lot of cash, lots of it that they can burn.
Hmm.
So they could pump money into Venezuela's petro. So there's been talks about how to get around the SWIFT system for business. And Turkey, who has been hit by sanctions themselves by the United States this year, is also looking at ways of doing business. So a bilateral agreement between Turkey and Venezuela through a cryptocurrency on the blockchain is actually something that they have a vested interest in doing. Turkey makes a lot of military, actually has their own military industrial complex through FNSSS. Um, that's their version of General Dynamics Lockheed Martin. So
Gotcha.
they have the ability to supply military modern military equipment to Venezuela in exchange for barrels of oil, as well as send doctors or potential doctors down to Venezuela. Now it wouldn't be out of the out of the norm that Turkey could actually help Venezuela build a new airport and actually build multiple airports inside their country, because they've done the same thing in Somalia recently. The biggest embassy that Turkey has is inside Somalia in Africa, and Turkey has been making its rounds around the globe. So anyone who's been either in opposition to the United States or has been friendly or independent of U.S. foreign policy, Turkey has been making their way there. Somalia, Venezuela, they've made their way down to Tunisia, Libya. Um, they're not too friendly with Egypt, but they've also been inside other parts of Africa as well. So they've had their African tour. So I
Now,
think they've invested about $5 to $10 billion into Africa.
those the tariffs that were placed on Turkey. Now that refresh my memory, that was electronics based, right?
No, that was on certain individuals inside Turkey. So during the purchase of the S-400 missile system from Russia.
Wasn't there something about like the iPhone going up in price or something like that because we were going to put some sort of electronics tariffs on Turkey or something? Do you recall
No,
this maybe like about 2 months ago?
Turkey wants to put counter tariffs on Apple because
Ah, that's
Apple.
what it was. That's what it was. Okay.
Right. So Turkey hurt Apple in that regard because Turkey is a big Apple purchaser or Apple customer of products. So um, they decided to go with Samsung.
Okay, that's all right. All right, all right. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah. So they also have a lot to offer Venezuela. So there's a lot of interest as to why Turkey and Venezuela is doing business now. When Erdogan had the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation or Islamic States, he actually personally extended an invite to Maduro. Maduro is not Muslim,
Right.
so Maduro is sitting at the table with Islamic powers. Now,
That's pretty damn symbolic.
right now, you see, right as he leaves Turk as Erdogan leaves Venezuela and finishes doing business there, he also flies to Moscow and he's doing business with Russia as to come up with different mechanisms um, for oil and other industry, other trade-based products. So now Russia is saying, let's create a global blockchain for finance to get around the SWIFT system.
And
They
I
could
want
be
to
talking.
say, I was going to say, and I want to say, you talked about this maybe a few weeks ago about this specific thing about what Russia was doing with regards to the blockchain, specifically with Venezuela and some other countries.
Hmm. Yeah. So now let's create a new financial transaction system through blockchain. Venezuela, Syria, Iran, Turkey, Egypt, Zimbabwe, um, Vietnam, India, Pakistan. All of these countries are now. There's at least 35 countries looking to get on and adopt this whole entire system, including Nicaragua and Cuba.
Wow. See, this is where you start to bring a lot of these countries, right, that have largely been dealing, they've been impacted by U.S. trade policy, right? But when you start to see the markings of these sorts of alliances taking shape in 20 years, that's when you're going to see a remarkable turnaround on all these countries in terms of their economies.
Right, and Venezuela's petro actually rides on Ethereum on the Ethereum blockchain. So we know that's a stable product
It's a stable
from a
product, right? Exactly. Yep.
development standpoint, and you take that and you match that with the diamonds and the gold. We know that Venezuela is deep inside Dominican Republic, getting gold at 70% of its value or 30% of its value relative to the market, becoming their own De Beers or Oppenheimer for that matter of Latin America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, we know that they've been sending oil to Haiti at relatively low cost. I think 25 cents a barrel, relatively dirt cheap. Um, there's something big that's about to happen. You don't have the president of Turkey fly all the way to Venezuela just to sit down and have empanadas and some plantanos. That's just not happening. That's not happening. He's down there for a reason. They're gonna set up shop. I wouldn't be surprised because Turkey has a pretty strong flotilla for maritime operations, so they could actually start docking their warships outside of Caracas,
That would be a trip right there.
right?
Yep.
Start docking their warships outside of
Like, oh,
Caracas.
and then,
Okay, go ahead.
oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, no, that's you. Go ahead.
Mhm. Right. So this is big stuff. I mean, he's just now getting to Moscow, so we haven't really heard as to what the dealings are with between the president of Venezuela, Maduro, and Putin. So we'll have to revisit this next week.
Yeah, I was gonna say because this is ongoing because it seems as though it's based on what we've been discussing here. There's items on the docket in previous live streams that we've done that are related to this, and we're kind of looking at like a progression, a progression story and what's going on. So yeah, we'll just have to follow it. Lionel, you got something?
I think Lionel's sleep.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to the next article. All right, this next article is from CGTN. Video: Ukraine bans Russian men aged 16 to 60 from entry. Holds artillery drills near Azov Sea. Um, basically, the Ukraine is gearing up for battle. Right now, they've implemented. Hey, can you mute up? Yeah, yeah. Right now, they've implemented martial law inside Ukraine, and they've ramped up all of their military exercises as well as engagements. They've also been seen as bringing T-64 battle tanks to the front line in certain areas near Crimea. Uh, and the banning of Russian men from 16 to age 60 is strategic because if you know anything about Russia's military, they have a lot of old servicemen involved. Their navy has guys that are 45 to 55 years old, still on submarines and warships because they don't
Hmm.
have enough men old enough who can actually join the navy. So that there's a shortage of Russian servicemen.
Okay.
You had something you want to add?
No, no, no. I didn't. No, I didn't know that. That's actually like the average age of like their servicemen was a lot higher than say like here in the United States. I didn't know that.
Mhm. Yeah, Russia has a hard time fulfilling their navy because their navy industry depleted or crashed after the Soviet Union collapsed. So a lot of your manufacturing base for warships and things like that dried up, and so these guys had to leave and go west. They had to go somewhere else. To these NATO states and go find work. And then there was no need to have a navy. You weren't producing warships. What's the point? No reason for people to enroll. So they have a hard time um, allowing people to go into retirement early. Not like the United States where people can just kind of like get out by 45 or something like that. But here in Russia, they're struggling to maintain um, any sort of strength in that area. So that's why the Ukraine is has stretched it out to 60 years old, even down to 16, because Russia allows servicemen as young as 16.
That's crazy, dude. Like 16-year-olds. That's crazy.
Yeah, they have an academy. Yeah, they have an academy that goes out early to get their guys. But we have something too similar to the United States, such as
I mean, it's like ROTC, right? ROTC. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Now, I mean, does this also explain why? I mean, and this was again referencing like an article from a couple weeks ago, like that sub that they had, right? Where a lot of it was largely AI powered, and you could reduce the crew to like 1/3 of what would be typical on a submarine. So is this why they're kind of pivoting maybe more to like an AI reliant uh, uh, you know, naval force and air force and stuff like that because of recruitment numbers?
yes, they don't have the capacity either, right? They don't have the docks and the ability to launch ships as they used to. Now they can make small ships like corvettes and shallow vessel cutter ships like Coast Guard vessels, but when it comes to big warships, they just don't have that capability right now. They won't have that capability for 10 years.
They're good with like ships that have like small crews, but if you're talking about like a full on like carrier, for example, like they just don't have the ability to like put a large fleet out there like that.
It takes time to build a carrier, anyways. But in Russia's regard, they just don't have the sort of navy capabilities that the United States has, because the United States has so many different places that they could dock and launch from. Russia doesn't have that. What they do have is they have strong aero power, and they have strong land warfare capabilities. But in terms of sea capabilities, they suck in that area. Because if you look at Syria, they had a hard time getting their warships to Syria, because
They did. Yep.
they don't have the capabilities to deploy tanks and things like that from landing craft. They just don't have it. So they had to bring a lot of that stuff through these big jumbo jets, through what do you call that? Through Iran's airspace, and then through
Yeah,
Iraq.
I was gonna say this would explain what was it back in what maybe like late 2016 and 2017, right? Where there were some issues about conflicts in airspace, like Syrian airspace and Iranian airspace, with regards to the Russians having access through those airspace, and then the United States maybe, displaying some aggressive maneuvers, if you will. I recall this from maybe like late 2016 and 2017.
Right. Right. So that's why the Ukraine can actually put pressure on them, but Ukraine doesn't have that sort of capability themselves. They are basically being donated warships from, well, I shouldn't say warships, but Coast Guard vessels from the United States and Great Britain. So, or I should say, the United Kingdom. And these little, cutter ships that you see, the Coast Guard uses, those are not exactly warships. Those are no, those are supposed to be meant for like rescue capabilities by the Coast Guard. You put a few
Mm.
guns on there, yeah, you look tough. That's like that's like Rich Piata, Piana, from YouTube, all steroid up and mad big but can't fight,
Right.
right? That sort of that sort of posturing doesn't really work with Russia, because what happens when you threaten somebody in military warfare, and maybe see Boogie can even attest to this, and I know as well. They hit that warship, that's it. They got to take that out. They're not going to just fire a few Kalashnikov rounds at it, a few AK-47 firing at it. No, you're going to get hit with a missile. You're going to get hit with a torpedo, and they're going to take that thing out in one swoop.
Right. So whatever you got on your ship, you better be able to do something.
Yeah, you send a Coast Guard vessel up there. That's like sending a rubber dinky up there. What's the point of that?
What's the yeah? Like you literally have zero munitions that could actually penetrate anything.
Well, these Coast Guard vessels that the Americans have donated to the Ukraine Navy have 57 millimeter guns on there, as well as a few surface to air missiles. But the, I wouldn't take that to war. That's something that you use for policing. You don't take a Crown
Right,
Victoria into a gun battle, right? You usually wait for an MRAP to show up, and let your SWAT team deal with it. These
right.
guys are trying to take, salvage vehicles and put battering rams on the front of it, crash
Yeah, I was
bars
gonna say
on it.
like
And,
a savage vehicle with some armor welded onto it.
oh yeah, oh yeah, the United States is hoping that the Russians take the bait and go into Ukraine and get themselves into an Afghan style battle where they can't win. But that's not going to happen.
Oh, I was gonna say, didn't okay. See, okay, now I got a reference, maybe like another article from about 3 weeks or a month ago. Now, wasn't there just some sort of like unilateral energy treaty that was signed between like Russia, Kazakh, like all the stand nations in Russia,
They did.
right? And okay, now wasn't and if I recall from that article, like there was like a security apparatus, right, that was negotiated within this treaty.
Hmm.
Okay. I also wanted some of the details that, man, we'd have to revisit it because some of the details are very, very, very interesting. But based on how they structured this, they created like a bubble in that region,
Hmm.
right? And you maybe have one or two NATO allies, right, within that whole region. There's not that many of them that are largely frozen out of this energy pact that they had signed. Man, we have to find that article again. We have to find that article again because it did have some very interesting bits in there about how they were going to form this energy pact with all the stand nations and Russia, and there was also some security measures built into that. So we'd have to kind of see how that comes into play. But I recall that article that we touched on maybe like
Well,
a month ago.
right. Ukraine gets their energy from Russia through Gazprom. So the Ukraine actually owes Russia billions of dollars in back payment. They're delinquent. And the thing is,
Well, I was
Russia
going to
does.
say, wasn't that the kind of like the crux of that whole thing that happened in the Ukraine a couple years ago? Because there was going to be this NATO agreement, and if the Ukraine would have signed on with NATO, Russia was largely just like, well, so wait a minute, by virtue of you doing that, you're going to walk from your financial commitments that you have to us.
Right, and the thing is, Russia can't, by I think by law, even by moral practice, they can't just leave the Ukrainians and the dark in the winter, right? You can't just leave them without energy to heat their houses. So basically, they're riding on a free meal ticket,
Yep.
and
Yep.
and basically think that they are not obligated to pay their debts, and that's not the case. The more you play around, the bigger the tab is going to be. Russia's not going to forget about that. They're going to take you to court for that. As a matter of fact, they already took him to court last year about that.
I was going to say, I thought they did. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Is Lionel still asleep?
I think he's just away.
No, I know, I'm joking.
Um, let's go on to the next article.
Okay.
This one should be interesting. You kidding me? All right, this one is from Press TV. Assad, steadfastness of independent states can restore balance to international arena. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad says independent countries are capable of changing the international arena and restoring balance to it by remaining steadfast in their battle against Western plots. Speaking in a meeting with the visiting North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho in Damascus on Tuesday, the Syrian leader said that despite the difference in the forms of wars and pressures to which Syria and North Korea have been exposed, their essence and purpose is the same: to weaken the countries that have an independent goal and stand in the face of Western projects. President Assad further said such wars are not just about Syria and North Korea, but for redrawing the map of the world, adding that the U.S. hostility towards all independent states of the world, including Syria and the North Korea in the north, knows no geographical limits. Ree, for his part, replayed or relayed to the Syrian president and people a verbal message from North Korean leader Kim Jong Un expressing Pyongyang's firm support for Damascus and offering congratulations over the victories the Syrian army has so far. Pyongyang's firm support for Damascus and offering congratulations over the victories the Syrian army has so far achieved in its years-long fight against terrorists, including the Takfiri Daesh terrorist group. The North Korean foreign minister also briefed the Syrian president about the North's foreign policy, noting that the enemy which North Korea, Syria, and all of the independent seeking countries have in common is hegemony and the foreign interference, which requires increasing coordination among those countries to confront foreign plots. The pair also touched upon the historical friendship and relations between the two countries, stressing that both Damascus and Pyongyang are resolute on to each of them. They also affirmed the need to maintain coordination in international circles to confront challenges and unjust sanctions. North Korea is not playing around.
Mm-mm.
Before they were just hiding, in mountains, shooting up, toy rockets. Now they're inside Damascus.
I was going to say that this is a very interesting discussion that he would have with them, with regards to being steadfast in their resolve, their national resolve with regards to their own independence. He's largely just basically telling them, look, stay the course. Stay the course. Don't allow, Western media influences and all that type of stuff to creep into the minds and hearts of your own peoples, to turn them against you. This is a very, very interesting discussion that he would have with like a North Korean diplomat. I mean, considering what we hear in the media here in the United States, the axis of evil, North Korea was a part of that, and hell, and in large regards, you can throw Syria into the mix of that. But then on the flip side, in listening to this piece here, you've got two of these supposed axis of evil members, right, talking about the importance of remaining independent. So just the from the objective viewpoint of this, I mean, one just has to think about what it is that has largely made countries like Syria or nations like Syria and North Korea enemies of the United States. If they're really sort of speaking to their own, nationalist sort of leanings, So that's very interesting, man. It's very interesting.
I am back. My apologies for my absence.
Oh, there he is.
Excuse me. Basically, tell well, I'm just reiterating. China's telling North Korea just keep a strong, firm grip on the on your future goals and keep steadfast on what you're doing. Don't worry about just pressing you on what America's doing or any other country. Just
Mhm.
keep the pace. Is this what he's saying?
Yeah, yeah. Let's also do a recap
Hello?
on what North Korea contributions have been to the Middle East, right? So in the '73 war, they were actually on the ground helping the Syrians in Yom Kippur, that war against Israel with Egypt. So they played on both sides. Um, so did the Cubans. The Cubans were also there in 1973 on the ground. The North Koreans actually flew the MiG fighter jets that were newly sent to the Syrians because the Syrians didn't know how to fly them. So they were the first ones to fly them in Vietnam, and they were very well trained on flying MiG fighter jets. So they were very useful in that regard. Um, so the relationship between North Korea and Syria goes all the way back almost 40 plus years. So there is a symbolic relationship between the two, and I personally would have liked to see um, I personally would have liked to seen um, North Korea actually send troops up to Damascus, as a sign of where they stand, on the global stage, right? To defend not only defend Damascus, but to send advisors and logistics management and whatever else they need to support the government. I would have liked to seen something like that done. I would have liked to seen North Korea end up in Lebanon, just to show their show where they stand. So,
Hmm.
all right, we'll move on to the next article.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything else to put input on this one.
Yep. All right, this one is from AlJazeera.com. Israel launches military operations against Hezbollah tunnels. Israel Israeli army says it's destroying tunnels allegedly dug from Lebanon, but that will stay on the side of its border. All right,
Allegedly, you say.
Yep. The Israeli forces have launched what they call an operation to expose and neutralize tunnels between Lebanon and Israel, allegedly dug by armed group Hezbollah. The operation was announced by the Israeli military on Twitter Tuesday. Israeli military spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Karikis, told Reuters news agency that the operation would only take place on Israel's side of the border, and that it would not extend into Lebanon.
Oh, no, and that of course not, of course not.
Hmm. And we see the Hezbollah activities as a flagrant and blatant violation of Israeli authority, he told Reuters. In a tweet, Israeli military spokesperson uh, Avichai Aradi said the Lebanese government is responsible for buildup of tunnels, saying they are endangering Lebanese citizens. Also on Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country would continue to take action to ensure the security of Israel. Whoever tries to attack the state of Israel will pay a heavy price, Netanyahu said in a statement. It will continue We will continue with additional actions in open and covert in order to ensure the security of Israel. Hezbollah has not responded to the military operation yet, but the United Nations near the Israeli-Lebanon border, UNIFIL, said in a statement it was notified of the operation on Tuesday morning. The overall situation of UNIFIL's area of operation remains calm, and UNIFIL is working with all the interlocutors in order to maintain the overall stability, the statement said. Uh, that's just a image of what they're referring to: the Golan Heights, Syria, Israel, West Bank, and Lebanon.
I
Yep.
always find these things mighty convenient for Israel, or maybe that's just me.
Well, so here's the deal. Benjamin Netanyahu has a lot of charges being pressed against him and his wife. His wife has already been balked by Israeli auditors and money launderers, anti-money
Yeah, I was
launderers.
gonna say they're spending like government money on like their house and shit, right? Is that what the charge was? She was basically using government money for all kinds of stuff.
Yes. So if that's the case, then Netanyahu is ordering this operation to take place because this makes him look good to the media as well as to the state of Israel. That yes,
Exactly. Exactly.
um, yeah, we're destroying Hezbollah tunnels. But how is it that Hezbollah was able to create these tunnels all the way into Israel and they didn't know about it?
That's okay. Look, I didn't want to go there, but since you did, I
Hmm.
mean, I was gonna say this is almighty convenient, isn't it?
Hmm.
I don't know. Because that's a very good point. Israel's very strong with regards to their security apparatus.
Hmm.
Very strong. How do you not know this?
And I think personally that those tunnels were created by created by Israel as a way to get into Lebanon. Because why would Hezbollah dig that obvious tunnel into Israel, knowing that's the only tunnel that they have? What's the point in that?
That's what I mean. That's why I'm like some shit on the surface, dude. Just like it's like just hollering, "Hey, question me."
Hmm.
Right. That's why as soon as you went into the article, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Okay, a lot of this doesn't even sound right on the surface. But then I think, again, I think you touched on what might actually be the underlying issue here, and it's the fact that like Netanyahu's wife has been brought up on charges. I heard about this.
Well, he's being brought up on charges as well, right?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I thought it was
Yeah.
just his wife.
Yeah, he's been using a lot of money and a lot of they're trying to tie him in with Trump. So
Wait, now, holy shit. Okay, now actually, now upon further analysis, that's kind of like a big deal, right? Especially in Israeli politics,
mhm,
right? To kind of have something like this going on in the Knesset,
mhm.
like to have, I guess, to have this internal squabble going on in like, Israeli Likud politics, like, damn.
Mhm. Right. So this makes him look good on the surface. I'm protecting Israel from these nasty Hezbollah people, and we're gonna hit Hamas in Gaza. The last few weeks, take out those guys and their little bottle rockets. And we'll fly inside Syria as well. We don't care if you have S-300 missile systems from Russia. We'll do what we want. We'll fly where we want and do what we want. It doesn't matter what you have in there. So that sort of machismo, that sort of bravado that Netanyahu is trying to project, is just posturing for the people. And the reality is he can't actually hold this up for so he can only hold this up for so long because um, everybody knows that you're playing around in the Middle East. You've been in Oman. You were just inside Bahrain, uh, potentially dancing inside Riyadh or Mecca. It's only a matter of time before you end up in Cairo. I don't know.
Weren't they wasn't not Netanyahu in Africa recently?
He was he
Wasn't
was in there
he, he
last
was
week.
there? Yeah, I was gonna say he was there recently, right?
He was there last week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
That's
were going
it's
on
all
about
it's all apropos.
yeah. He's trying to get into the African Union, so he's pushing this hard because if he can get into the African Union, this solidifies his position inside Israel. That I brought Israel into the greater
Africa.
global scale, right? The
Mm-hmm.
chess players, the chessboard.
Right. Right.
In the
Who is that?
reality,
Is that? I was gonna say, is that Scholar Ching that just joined us?
I believe so.
Yo,
Yeah,
what's going on, brother?
get your mic together.
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
Yeah, you
Chilling,
have a
Sorry,
lot of
chilling, man.
background
thank you.
noise.
Thanks for letting me in.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
no problem, man. No problem. Welcome.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Mike. By the
Yes,
way,
sir. Yes, sir. You have anything you want to add?
are we on the topic of Israel? Are we still on the topic of the G20? Wait, I just joined in. What topic are we on right now?
It's Israel in Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, right? Yeah, that's another thing I never understand, right? So, you guys know that whole the war against Yemen on the by Saudi Arabia, right?
Okay.
Apparently that Israel is behind it. Israel support the Saudis effort against Yemen. And as we know that Yemen is what predominantly what Shiite. So I think this whole conflict between Hezbollah and Israel partly is because Israel is self-exacerbated by supporting the Saudi led Sunni campaign essentially against the Shi the Shiites in Yemen. And as you know
Right.
that Hezbollah is associated with what Shiite. So by supporting the efforts of bombing Yemen, it's actually Israel just exacerbates its relationship with the Hezbollah. Because otherwise they would have get along. What's funny is that that's another thing I never understand, right? When we talk about this type of radicalism, right? Radical Islam, whatever, we often fail to differentiate between the Shia and the Sunni. Usually, Shia is the one that most peaceful. Well, why is it peaceful? I'm putting a big quotation mark around it.
Hmm.
So that's why I want to add. I,
Well, and I think it's a very good point that you bring up with regards to the subtle differences, because in American media, there isn't a difference made between them, right? There isn't a difference made, right?
Yeah,
We largely,
that's exactly what Trump said recently. He said Shia and what do you call that Sunni. He said, what's the difference? Aren't they all Muslim?
right?
yeah,
But
that's
but
all.
but but scholar Chain just made a very good point as to the differences between the two and why that's significant geopolitically speaking.
Yeah, we when we talk about fighting the the fundamental, the Islamic fundamentalism, we primarily fighting against the Sunni, not the Shiites at all. If anything, Shia is the one who actually seek peace a lot more than the Sunni, and so that's why the fact that the President Trump failed to differentiate them just another evidence of how little Western world really understand the whole geopolitics behind the Middle East. That's what I want to say.
I agree 100%.
All right, we'll move on to the next article. All right, this one is from the WallStreetJournal.com. NATO meeting to be dominated by Russia-Ukraine clash. Moscow seizure of Ukrainian ships and sailors will overshadow planned talks about Trump threat to withdraw from nuclear treaty with Russia. Oh, you got to pay. You got to be a subscriber. All right, let me just read whatever they have left. Russia seizure last week of 3 Ukrainian naval ships and 24 sailors promised to dominate a NATO foreign ministers meeting that starts Tuesday, which was yesterday, with members on both sides of the Atlantic grappling to craft a robust response. Russia's actions in the Black Sea looks to set looks set to eclipse a separate debate on Russia within the North Atlantic Treaty Organization over how to address Moscow's alleged violation of a 31-year-old arms control treaty. So this is about the INF. But I want to play this video so everybody else can see it, not this commercial.
You said they seized was that 3 ships and
Three,
24 service members?
24, 24, 30, and three shallow draft ships.
Wow.
And the video is playing right now. You can see it. Basically, the Sea of Azov is actually it's only 10 feet deep or something to that effect, 10 to 15 deep. So it's not like a big warship can actually pass through there anyways.
Wow. So what was the end result of the seizure? Now are the service members in custody?
They are in custody for 60 days. So from now up until late January, they'll be in jail. What they have done is they have confessed that they've been given orders to not adhere to Russian commands for identification on the sea. So basically, before they can pass their ships through, the Azov, they have to call in advance and identify who they are coming in. They did not do
They
that.
didn't do that. They didn't do that. Okay.
And what the
That was by order. By order.
correct. And what the sailors are saying is basically that they were given orders from high up not to do this. I mean, not to respond to Russian calls. So when the Russians saw that they were passing under this new Crimea bridge that connects Crimea and Russia, which is a strategic choke point for logistics and connecting the two places together, the Russians said, "No way, we're not going to let that happen." So they sent out everything. They sent out fighter jets. They sent out helicopters. They sent out multiple warships, or Coast Guard ships, Coast Guard vessels to interact with them. And what they did was they allowed themselves. They put themselves in the path of these Russian vessels to allow the vessels to crash into the tugboat and the other small warships. And what this does on camera, the optics make it look like Russia is aggressive. So when it comes down for the G20, Putin wants to talk to Trump, but Trump says, "I can't talk to you because of what happened in the Sea of Azov."
Now I was gonna say is because I was just about to. That was kind of like the question I was gonna ask. What would be the intention? Right? What would be the intent to purposely send some ships in, right, and to completely ignore the Russian, like their calls, right? When you're coming into their territory, to completely ignore it. Was it to create these optics?
Create
Was it? Say that again.
create the optics and justify going into martial law inside Ukraine so you can launch an
Right.
attack on the eastern part of Donbass and the Donetsk. And what that would allow is the locking up of journalists, suppressing any sort of media, shutting down the internet, can't communicate out, and rounding up people late at night who's not supposed to be on the street because now there's a
Yeah, I was
curfew in
gonna.
place.
Yeah, I was gonna say because to basically make that the mission, there has to be some sort of underlying agenda behind it, right? You don't just send guys in and just be like, yeah, ignore the calls, get apprehended, go to jail for 60 days, without there being some sort of other underlying agenda behind it.
Right. Right, and United States is basically, or the Atlantic Council, which is a media wing of NATO, is saying, well, the United States and NATO should actually sail their warships into there. Realistically, this can't happen because none of the U.S. warships could actually float through that strait because the strait is only about 20
It's
feet.
shallow. Yeah, it's shallow.
It's too shallow for them to actually put their warships in there. What they could do is they can put ribs, your rubber fighter, your rubber boats into that area. Your shallow draft vessels into that area. The thing is,
Right.
if you put your vessels into that area, now you're asking for a confrontation.
All right, so what's up, brothers?
What's
Hey,
good,
what's up?
you?
Not much, man. So this is my question. So if pretty much that's we got all the facts, why they did what they did. Why would Trump not want to deal with Putin at the G20 just off of that when automatically you already know what the reason why they did that for? Like, why would Trump play that move?
Trump doesn't create foreign policy. That's up to Bolton. So this happened behind Trump's back. Trump doesn't even understand what the Sea of Azov is. He doesn't even know what that is. All he knows is that he runs his country and that he's trying to build a relationship with Russia. The whole objective is to set booby traps in place so that you can't talk to Putin. This is another booby trap.
You think
The Russian,
Bolton? You think Bolton kind of like played that out like that?
there was a meeting between the Ukrainian delegation on November 16th
Mm-hmm.
in Washington, D.C. This was a week before this even happened.
Mm.
If you go on U.S. State Department's or USAJobs.gov and you look at their career site, you see that they're looking for Ukrainian linguists, Russian linguists to hire.
Wow.
This is recent. The last 30 days, they posted these job postings.
Mm.
Paul Bryant asks, Mike, has the Russian Navy blockade the area. They did for 24 hours
Yep.
to stop any more ships from coming in, but they've since lifted the blockade. Um, if the Russians wanted to sink those vessels, they would have done that already. They don't see the necessity to sink a vessel in such shallow waters. That doesn't make any sense because firing up on those warships and sinking one of them would actually be a declaration of war, right? So now you're in an immediate conflict. Russians are not stupid. They play chess. They don't play checkers.
And doing it in shallow water would just really, it would be real bad optics. Real bad optics.
Right. Right. These guys are really scared. If you look at the interviews with them in Russian, and they kind of translate it into English, basically these guys are shook. They have no clue how deep of doodle that they're in, and they're basically giving up that, spilling the beans on everything that we were put up to this. We had nothing to do with this. But who put you up to this?
I was
Poroshenko.
going to say that's what I mean, dude. It's like, yo, there had to be something to this. You don't just send ships in like that, ignore Russian calls, and say no, go ahead, take the charge, do the 60 days in jail. There's got to be
Right.
something else to that. There's got to be something else to that.
Right. So the idea is send these yo-yos up there who have no idea what they're doing and get them caught up there. The Russians weren't going to kill them. I mean, but they did think that something else was going to happen. So they brought out all the fighter jets and the helicopters and
Yeah.
land warfare to sea capabilities. The KH-35, which is no joke. That's a carrier killer. One shot from one of those and your carrier is going to be sinking.
And I mean it's weird, man, because this is kind of like a game of like, chicken or cat and mouse, right? Because you purposely send some people in like that, you're going to get that response, and it's almost as if the Russians would also know, right? They would be like, okay, well, look, we're going to throw this show of force out there, but we ain't about to light nobody's asses up like that. But we gotta really see like what's really good with all of this. Because like I said, man, you're going to just send people in and just be like, yeah, the whole point of this mission here, ignore it, go in, get apprehended, do the 60 days. We'll take care of the rest.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I watched that video, right? And it was on an article on RT. And they were saying that the Russians kept saying, get out the way, get out the way. It's like they purposely just stood there and let themselves get hit. So it's like,
right.
It's like, and then they paint a picture on the media like, okay, again, like, yeah, Russia is the aggressor when they really wasn't. If you even listen, that's why I was trying to figure out what they were saying. And RT was saying that they were saying, get out the way, get out the way. And so it's pretty deep, man, how they, I get a vibe that Bolton had something had a lot to play with this, man. He had something because he does a lot of dealings on the side that I've noticed that usually these countries, man, he'll go visit a place and something will happen there. So I've noticed that trend with him, man. Uh, as far as Pompeo and North Korea, and he said I didn't hear too much of the last article, but with North Korea and Damascus, what's going on with that right there?
North Korea was in Damascus to congratulate President Assad on his victories on the ground and actually pledge support. North Korea is getting big. You haven't seen North Korea leave North Korea or the peninsula in years. No one has seen this before. So now, you see them expanding their way up north, right? So they was in Kazakhstan, I think. They was in Kazakhstan, I think, and they also traveled to Moscow, right? Or they do have a meeting in Moscow, if they haven't already had it. The Cuban president was in North Korea just a few weeks ago, and now you see North Korea creeping in back into the Middle East, as well as Africa. There's an African trip planned, so they're making their way back in, and they're not taking any shorts. So
interesting. Yeah. The whole playing field is changing, man. Especially all these countries that were more isolated. The playing field is changing, but the situation with I thought the situation with the Russian with the Strait was this is over Crimea, right? I thought it was over because of that bridge, and they wanted to was over that strait. But once they connected that bridge, doesn't Russia kind of like own that portion of the water?
They own Crimea. It was a referendum put in place that allowed um, them to succeed Ukraine and actually be a part of Russia. So um, for the most part, Crimea is Russia. Even on
Right.
Google Maps, it shows that. So
So they pretty much they pretty much have a majority control over that strait, then, right? Then
the
I
strait,
don't
the strait, the
it's only
strait
way
is
in and out of there.
jointly the strait is jointly owned between Ukraine and Russia. So
Okay.
the documents show that they both have to contact each other when there's ingress and egress flow of traffic
Mm, okay.
because the water is
But
so
if you
shallow.
got, but I was gonna say, but if you got one party thinking about pivoting towards NATO,
Mhm.
right, and then the other one, you've got a problem.
Well, in order for them to really join NATO, they would have to join the European Union first. European
What?
Union does not want Ukraine because Ukraine is a basket case um, that is not beneficial to the European Union. I mean,
Right.
they don't really bring anything to the European Union that would be beneficial.
Now,
So
but that was the but wasn't that was the crux of the conflict that happened there in the Ukraine like 2 years ago, right? Was the talk of the Ukraine, you know, partnering with the EU or NATO, which would cause a wide rift between them and Russia.
Russia said it's a red line. If Ukraine joins NATO, then it's war.
That's what I mean. They go, well, I was being nice when I said that.
Mhm. Right. Ukraine joining European Union might be one thing, but then Russia asks, well, if Poland and Ukraine could join the European Union, then why not Russia? Why not bring Russia into the European Union? Well, they don't want Russia in the European Union
I was
because they
going to
have all.
say because then Russia would essentially be one of the larger seats at the table.
Right. Well, you can't attack your neighbors, right?
Right. Right.
Right. So let me go back to the chat. Paul Bryant asks, Mike, I'm not following this situation. What do you see Russia's end game in Ukraine? Let the Ukraine starve themselves because that's exactly what's going to happen. It gets cold inside Ukraine between October and April. So there's an urgency for energy to heat those homes, and when Ukrainians are freezing, and they're not going to go to Russia and complain about what Russia's doing in the Sea of Azov or what Crimea is doing. They're going to attack their government and say, why isn't the Ukrainian president doing something about our cold homes? See, the United States is different. United States, you can't turn energy off in the middle of winter. It's considered to be inhumane. It's actually a human rights violation to do something like that. In the Ukraine, the rules are different. They'll let those people, go without heat if they have to. But the Russians are not stupid, so the Russians going to keep supplying energy to the Ukraine through Gazprom and say, here's your energy. We'll see you later. Basically, this it's on tab. But Ukraine owes billions of dollars in delinquency payments to Russia because for over this energy. They haven't paid their bill in a few years. They're basically a bunch of deadbeats.
And I was going to say, and if they were to pivot and move over to the EU, they would largely just leave that bill unpaid.
Well, they wouldn't be able to get out of it because the Russians already took them to court.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, then there was that whole part. But I mean, that was largely kind of like the impetus behind that whole sort of skirmish that took place, because it was like, whoa, wait a minute, dude, we got commitments on the table, bro. You can't just be talking about perhaps moving over to some sort of new arrangement. Not when we got we have debts to settle.
Hmm. Hmm. And now they're attacking Russian-speaking people, Paul. So what they're basically saying is that any Russian male between the ages of 16 and 60 years old is banned from being inside Ukraine. They'll be
Wow, I
banned.
didn't hear that one.
We covered that story earlier.
Oh no, that's right. We did. We did. That's right. I'm sorry. We did.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then you're talking about declaration of war because now you're not talking about people's ideologies, right? You're not talking about Muslims and Christians and you're talking about people's ethnicities and their language. Now you're going. Now this is racism 101.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about rounding people up and putting them inside concentration camps inside the Ukraine.
Hmm. Scarlett Chen, you got anything to add to this?
Yeah. I just want to say though, I don't know why you even bothered to trying to stop this because, given the history of between Europe, Ukraine, and Russia, I mean, what did they say? Like what more than 40% of the Ukrainian can trace heritage to Russian.
Yep.
I mean, the whole Slavic ethnic composition. So yeah, it would be very interesting to see how exactly would the EU try to respond to this continue because if you think about this, if we talk about Eastern Europe, because Eastern Europe is always going to be under the influence of Russia regardless. So the fact that Europe trying to Europe is more of a construct of Western Europe than Eastern Europe, right? So I would say that it's really when it boils down to it's between the conflict between the Eastern Europe and the Western Europe. That's all I want to say.
All right. We got a couple more articles. I just want to get through them real quick.
Okay.
All right. This one is from RT, and it's about mapping out the G20 winners and losers. And my take on the G20 is that it's much ado about nothing. It's an economics forum, but didn't really get a whole lot done. What's interesting about where they held it was in Argentina. Argentina is actually a big holder of Litecoin cryptocurrency, one of the biggest holders of Litecoin cryptocurrency. So it's interesting to see that a place that's holding on to cryptocurrency isn't really talking about cryptocurrencies at an economics forum. Find that to be interesting. They're not even at a seat at the table.
I think they trying to because they're trying to suppress cryptocurrency to begin with. I mean, so obviously they're gonna completely ignore it. If anything, they are on the war right now against cryptocurrency, isn't it? I mean, I think that's the main reason that cryptocurrency has been dropped, and my investment in cryptocurrency has been tanked. So I mean, that's why I'm, I'm I'm not surprised the fact that they completely ignored the whole aspect of cryptocurrency in Argentina.
Well, Argentina is not a major player, anyways, within the G20. In fact, I don't even think they're a part of the G20 for that matter. If they are, they're not as consequential as the rest of the members.
Yeah. Well, they need a neutral ground. They need a neutral ground. That's the reason. I think they
Now,
chose Argentina. They just randomly
now,
choose some random. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
oh no, I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say quiet is kept though. Even though you're looking at a suppression, what I'm viewing anyway is a suppression in the cryptocurrency markets because on the low there is a large buy up from the whales, as Mike would call it, right? So, let's look at this dip or this downturn in the crypto markets with a fair bit of skepticism.
I think this whole G20 is really just, I think, more of a reorientation of this top economic player, um, reorient their trade policy with respect to each other. Especially given this whole trade war environment. So I think trying to come together, trying to solve this quote unquote peacefully, before any because what I'm seeing right now is very similar to when we talk about the pre 1930, the whole trade war. Remember that, which is really part of the reason that contributed to the Great Depression. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why they have the G20 right now. I think part of the reason is to prevent that from happening again. Because if the trade war continues to escalate, I mean that will
Well,
be a
Mm. Go ahead, Mike.
let's look at it this way, right? If you're looking at this page right here, or this image right here, um, Theresa May wants to leave the the European Union through Brexit. Angela Merkel and Macron want to form a European army, a European Union army, and Mohammed bin Salman (MBS) is accused of being the the top goon behind the murder of Khashoggi. And then you look at Putin; he's been accused of being an aggressor in Azov. Trump has beef with China over these very radical tariffs. And then you look at Poroshenko on screen, and you see that Poroshenko is not there because he's antagonizing Russia right now as we speak, right? So what I'm saying, all of these people here don't even get along. They all have some form of political differences that are very strong in their position, right? Merkel doesn't. I mean, Theresa May uh, is having a hard time with Brexit because they have to pay 80 billion pounds or 80 billion euros to the European Union in order to exit, and the people of United Kingdom are saying, hey, why are we paying the exit toll to get away from these people? Basically, the European Union is making this more difficult on anybody who tries to leave. That's the consequences of playing the game. And then you have Angela Merkel and Macron who are saying, I don't want to put sanctions on Russia for what they did in Azov, in the Sea of Azov. Trump can't talk to Putin because of the Sea of Azov. Uh, the only real major player who came out solid was the president of China, Xi Jinping.
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. He has a very interesting position to play right now because really, think about this whole trade war between I'm thinking about between China and America. China is, I think, what's believe it or not, China actually emerged to be this moderate partner, this moderate partner who, because China's been trying to kind of accommodate, some of the grievances the United States have against this whole trade deficit. So the fact that Trump has that, what's that guy's name that he just that to lead this negotiation team, the hardliner, I forgot his name, Mike
Pompeo.
Mike Webb.
Pompeo.
Yeah, Perro. Yeah, he isn't he the same guy who produced a documentary, say the Death to China, whatever, Death by China, something like that. So he's a hardliner. So the fact that it, if he's representing this whole trade policy, the United States with respect to China, I mean, again, that just continue to exacerbate the problem. I don't know why these people just want to continue to exacerbate the problem as opposed to ameliorate it. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
It's racism, Scholar Chang. That's what that is.
Well, the thing is, I agree with your points, Scholar Chang. And I think it largely just sort of has to do with the philosophical notions of Western hegemony, right?
Yeah.
And that ultimately, at the end of the day, if you are on a consistent and persistent um, uh, quest for conquest, then you're never really
Hmm.
thinking in arrears or in hindsight with regards to whatever sort of debts or anything like that have to be paid, because you're on a constant track for exploration and you know what I mean. It's like,
Yeah.
it's sort of like I can't be bothered with that right now because I got more resources to claim. right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I'll get to you later. I'll get to you later. Like that sort of mindset.
yeah. And you know what's funny? You know what's funny is that there's actually there isn't Western hegemony anymore. They think they still trying to play this early 18th century, the late 19th, 17th century, those global policy, thinking that there's when European hegemony was at its peak, but there's no Western hegemony anymore. So they still have this
Right,
kind of
right.
mindset, but the reality is the Western hegemony is in decline right now. So I don't know why the fact that these. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Papa, you about to say something? I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead, bro. Go ahead.
No. Yeah. I just want to finish. Saying is that this this whole notion of they clinging onto this last remnants of Western hegemony, I think do a lot worse to the Western society than the other way around. This whole, for example, this whole G20, in respect to the trade policy, where you know, I think Europe is more realistic in terms of well, I just I take it back. Europe is more realistic with respect to the trade policy part, but it's not realistic with respect to the culture integration part. But that's the other topic. That's
Right,
the other
right.
topic I
No,
want to say. Yeah. Go
absolutely,
ahead.
I agree. What's up, Noah? Oh, okay. Well, he's there, but I think he's muted.
Yeah. Um, we can move on to the next article. All right, this one is from PressTV.com. Iranians can hold U.S. aircraft carrier hostage if they want to. American writer and journalist E. Michael Jones says the aircraft carrier is the obsolete form of military technology, and the Iranians can hold the U.S. carrier hostage if they want to. On Monday, America announced that the U.S. Navy was sending one of its aircraft carriers to the Persian Gulf as a show of force. The USS John C. Stennis and its accompanying ships, which are currently moving through the Indian Ocean, will arrive in the Persian Gulf by the end of the week. The Wall Street Journal reported Monday, citing unnamed military officials. Interesting. If the true if true, this will be the first time in 8 months that the U.S. steps up its military presence in the region to such levels, the official said. That's the longest period Washington has gone without an aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf in the past 2 decades. The naval deployment is a direct response to Iran's influence in the region. Quote, what we are really seeing here is a demonstration of the rule that generals always fight the last war. The last war in this regard was World War II, when the aircraft carrier replaced the battleship as the main way to project power on the seas. John said in an interview, Press TV on Tuesday, he said that, quote, the aircraft carriers are portable airports. You can take them anywhere around the world and you can spread your power, attack the people you otherwise couldn't do. He said that the aircraft carrier has become an obsolete form of military technology. The aircraft carrier has been made obsolete in China by missiles which can strike the carrier 2,100 miles off the coast, well beyond the range of the F-18 fighter jet. And it also has been made obsolete by this situation in the Persian Gulf. The analyst said that if an aircraft carrier sails to the Persian Gulf, the Iranians can hold it hostage by sinking ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and the carrier will be stuck there with no way out. The other issue, of course, is whether the aircraft carrier can defend itself against missiles. Now, this is the open question. No one knows the answer. The first time the Russians fired missiles from their ship in the Caspian Sea into Syria, the United States pulled its aircraft carriers out of the Persian Gulf. He noted. I remember that. beyond that, the big unanswered question is whether the aircraft carrier can defend itself from state of the art missile technology. He said no. No one knows the answer. The first time the so what are we seeing here is a show of obsolete force, coupled with arrogant foreign policy that has given up on both diplomacy and the morals, in favoring to make it right and concluded. So basically, the Americans, the Americans don't even have the capabilities to go to war at this point. And I say that because they haven't been tested on the high seas. So those aircraft carriers and their armadas that they run with, destroyers and frigates and corvettes and submarines. Outside of the submarines, they really don't have they really haven't had a clear conflict with an equal power.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, that hasn't actually been the case. It's largely been these sort of wars that have been waged where, it was more of a takeover type situation where
Yeah.
the plans were drawn up to go into a sovereign nation and basically just usurp power and take it. But
Yeah.
an actual battle met on the high seas. What maybe I don't know when does that legitimately happen? World War II.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the closest would be would be World War II. Because if you look at after World War II, from Korean War, right, to Vietnam War, to even Gulf first Gulf War, America never really had like a decisive victory. We talk about decisive military victory since the World War II. I mean, not
Well,
once.
but also like like a legit like conflict on the open seas though. I think that's kind of what Mike was alluding to. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we haven't seen no parts of that in some time.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Another thing, to go back to Michael's point, right? Michael said America is not capable of going to war. Even if America is capable of going to war, the question is would it win? Would it actually win? That's another entire different issue, right? Because I mean, really, think about it. How popular is America and the military campaign right now by America? Really, I mean, exactly how much support. I mean, just look at the most recent conflict, Iraq, was in Iraq and Afghanistan, where the justification is even higher. But think about if America to wage a military campaign right now, the opposition would be even a lot stronger. So if America can even win quote unquote the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, what makes you think is they're gonna have waged another war, for example, against God, knock on wood, against Iran?
Well, I don't think Afghanistan and Iraq was a fair comparison, right? Because
Yeah,
let me mute you real quick because excessive noise. They're fighting a guerrilla war in Afghanistan against a non-conventional military. So what happens here is these guys are dug inside mountains. They're inside pits in the ground. You really can't do anything against something like that from a conventional standpoint. So you have to attack it from a different perspective. But what happens is when you run into somebody like China who has military warships equal to yours, if not better, right? More modern technology, new engines, quicker, faster, um, and longer range. They can outrun you. What do you do in a conflict like that? And is it worth getting into a battle with these guys, not knowing that you're not knowing whether or not your ships can actually handle an impact? Because the KA-35, like we were mentioning earlier, that's a ship carrier killer. One hit from one of those, and it's made to take you out. It's supersonic. And the Russians have a whole lot of them.
Damn.
Pointed. They have a whole lot of them that are pointed at American, well, not Americans, but just anything that comes inside their waters. And they also brought those to the forefront, I think in Syria. So the idea of going up against something like that, I mean, a KH-35 holds 4. Actually, let me bring this up because that should be something that we should look at. What a KH-35 is capable of doing. United States doesn't have an answer for that. And what happens when you get into a conflict like that? What president wants to get into a conflict not knowing whether or not he can win?
That's the worst thing you can do for your presidency.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking at what happened under the Bush. That whole Iraq war going into and that's even not a considered conventional war. The whole Iraq war is not even in the real conventional war. Imagine how disaster would be in an actual conventional war.
So the video that we're looking at right now is a KH-35 coastal missile battery. These are anti-warship missiles that skim across the water and are very portable.
Another thing, morale. Speaking of war, morale is very important, right? Is that what it said? It's not what the art of warfare is. That is psychology, and have actual tactics. That how supportive the military true member actually of another military campaign versus talk about Russia. Russia's. Even though with all this problem he has, its military probably has a lot. I would bet they have a lot more higher morale than the United States does.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me read the chat real quick. Paul Bryant says the Air Force can put tankers in the air, given the F-18 basically unlimited range. And the new guided missile destroyers were built to defend carriers from missile striking carriers. We don't know that for sure because let me pull up another video, Paul, just so you can get an understanding. So this video here shows a Russian fighter jet with electronic warfare capabilities strafing the USS Donald Cook. This is only a couple years ago.
Wait, what's going on here, Mike?
I'm showing Paul a video of a Russian fighter jet with electronic warfare capabilities strafing the Donald Cook. And what they said on the Donald Cook was that their radar systems were scrambled and they couldn't fire a missile even if they wanted to. Systems are offline.
Oh, shit. Wow. Right as that plane flew over their ship?
Yep. And it flew over 12 times to send a message to the Russians, to the Americans that you're in our backyard. Now, the Chinese see if I can find it real quick. Right, this one was recent. So PLA destroyer actually got relatively close to a U.S. destroyer and actually bumped into it.
That's pretty damn close.
If I can get that close to your warship, what's to say I can't take you out?
I mean, did they not know that they got that close?
Yeah, they did.
They did, yeah. It was a deliberate. It was a deliberate attempt. They wanted, they wanted to block the, the Chinese excursion to the southern China Sea. That's the main reason they sent the fleet there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
intimidation technique, intimidation. So go ahead.
mhm, right. So what I'm saying here is that electronic warfare, cyber warfare capabilities have put the United States at in a very awkward position on their naval front. A lot of their warships are outdated. Okay, they don't get software updates like a laptop or iPhone or something like that. You know, once those warships deploy, that's it. You can't take them offline because you'd be sitting in the middle of an ocean. Um, the Chinese know all your capabilities as well as the Russians. As a matter of fact, any top 50 countries that are either developing or are actually moving to a first world status or a second world status have the capabilities to knock your cyber capabilities offline. Basically, they can launch an attack against you and take you offline. So the idea that the Americans are ready for a fight or a conflict with the Russians and the Chinese and all these the Iranians and the Persian Gulf, that's not going to happen.
There's a lot of adversaries there.
We know that the Iranians actually took out one of the CIA satellites. They actually blinded it. Cyber warfare capabilities.
Hey, what's going on, Noah?
Hey, what's up, guys? How are you?
All right. Now Lionel's a Navy guy. I mean, maybe Lionel has something he wants to chime in on this.
Been sitting back listening. I didn't know a PLA destroyer bumped into a Navy destroyer. That's you can't fight close quarters in the military like that because your guns don't even aim that far, down.
Mm-hmm.
Once your close quarters, but those big guns on military Navy ships are for distance fighting, and
Mm-hmm.
you have all these sonar. You have dedicated areas for sonar tech and other connected jobs on the in the, on a boat. I don't understand how they allowed that other destroyer to get that close. That's pretty shocking to me.
That's
That
because that other
that
destroyer had cyber warfare capabilities that basically took your radars offline, made you blind.
that's
That's what I was asking, man. Like, how did that
need to
ship
get
sneak
their
up like that?
information up to date because that doesn't make sense. They
You
need to
want?
get
Mm-hmm.
uh-huh.
No, I was just gonna say, you want to get into the fight on the water? I don't think so.
No, not knowing that your equipment could be taken out like that because you all are right. The Navy do have the world's largest Navy, but that Navy was never tested in combat
Mm-hmm.
since the what 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So
World War II.
even then, the Navy war, even then the Navy fleet looked different. So they letting it getting that close is alarming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you take into consideration um, some of those warships are actually just tin metal at this point. You
Mm.
know, it won't take much for a torpedo to take it out. And Paul Bryant in the chat says, I guess that USS Zumwalt isn't the game changer that the Navy thinks it is. It isn't. It's stalled multiple times on the water. It can't even float. And this is supposed to be state of the art ship, and it costs the United States government over $100 billion. Somebody got paid off of this, and they ran away with the money and left you with a dead ship.
Yeah, that.
Contractors.
Yeah, I just want to add quickly. That's so important. That is so important. You know, we when we think about United States, quote unquote, being the strongest military, right? We think of all these quote unquote advanced technology and so forth. Who knows? Maybe all those just paper tigers. America spent all this money to build these technology, to build up all these defense technology, but half them probably craps anyway. These contracts they probably overcharge. The government, the defense department for everything. So even though you might think, oh, fighter jet, for example, or warship, for example, costs $100 million, is going to be the best warship and fighter jet. But who knows? Maybe they're just saying inflate the price. So what's the good way to gauge the effectiveness without actually being a war scenario, right? Being an actual battle scenario, we can never tell. So yeah, so maybe just could be the whole thing could be just a facade.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean they charge like $1,000, $4,000 for a freaking toilet. I'm pretty sure you guys know about the infamous story, right? They charge $4,000 for a damn toilet on the Pentagon. And imagine how much they charge for everything else. That's all I want to say. Go ahead.
That's because the seat warms up when you put your ass on it. So,
That's worth $4,000, man.
yeah, yeah. Let me read the chat. Paul Bryant says, "Yeah, but the Navy ships have lookouts. Even with binoculars, you can see another ship miles away." Mike, I question how a Chinese ship gets 45 yards close. Something sounds funny about that. Actually, it doesn't.
Yeah, they do have lookouts. I don't, that's why I'm thinking like someone was not doing a job.
But you know, Lionel, it could have been those guys been down in the galley, lollygagging around. You know how they get down in the ships.
Like if no one saw that boat coming, a bunch of people are in the brig. That's alarming because you have backups to backups. Yeah, your radar can be knocked out, your sonar can be um,
Hmm.
out of commission because of cyber warfare, but you still have human eyes, people on deck, uh, top side. People were sleep at the helm. People are in the brig because that's serious business. Even if nothing happened, the thought of what if it's yeah, somebody's in it. A couple people in the brig. That's alarming.
Hmm. Well, let's look at this. Get this article. This is from the Washington Post. In the first, a Chinese spy extradited to the U.S. after stealing technology secrets. Justice Department says. In the first, federal agents lured a Chinese government spy to Belgium, where authorities transferred him this week to the United States for prosecution on economic espionage charges. Actually, this isn't the article I was looking for, but this isn't the first time. Basically, there was a person working for the U.S. Navy who was with the U.S. Navy who was stealing secrets from the U.S. Navy and going to China with it, and they caught him recently. How long has that been going on for?
That could have been going on for years. Um, it's no telling. It's really no 100% 100% telling. They catch what they can, but yeah,
Mhm.
Do you think this has anything to do with Xi and Trump meeting up in Argentina? Maybe this is I don't know, a peace offering or something like that.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't. I have no comment on that one.
Wait, we talk about the Navy confrontation with the Argentina.
No, G20, G20.
Oh, G20 with the Navy confrontation. Yeah, yeah.
No,
Go ahead.
anti-gravity. Repeat your question.
Yeah.
No, in terms of a spy, basically an economic spy being transferred to the Americans, I don't know of any other time that that's ever happened. So, do you think this has something to do with the G20 summit, kind of like a appeasement to the U.S.?
Uh,
Oh, maybe I can. I can see that. Having some type of validity to it
wait.
because it never happened before.
Yeah. Wait. We talk about appeasement coming from who? Coming from China to the United States?
China to America.
Oh, you mean appeasement from? Sorry, Mr. Anti-Gravity. You talk about appeasement
Yeah.
coming from which country to America?
Oh, okay. Could you mute yourself for 1 second? I'll explain one more time. Basically, since they gave over a spy, a spy, the government is always involved in it, or at least turns a blind eye to any kind of corporate espionage that they do, and a lot of times themselves are involved. You know, I've I haven't heard yet of them extraditing one of their own citizens. This is a Chinese citizen, right, Mike?
Um, I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But the article I'm looking at right now is from the New York Times, and it says, "Scholar Chain, you got to mute yourself." Yeah, the article I'm looking at right now is the New York Times. Chinese hackers steal unclassified data from Navy contractor. Washington. Chinese have stolen sensitive data related to naval warfare from the computers of a Navy contractor, American officials said on Friday, in another step in the long-running cyber war between two global adversaries. The breach occurred this year, the officials said, when Chinese government hackers infiltrated the computers of a company working on a Navy submarine and underwater programs contract. The company, which was not identified, was doing work for Naval Undersea Warfare Center, which is based in Newport, Rhode Island. Officials said that the data gleaned by China was unclassified. Navy officials declined to speak publicly about the hack, which was first reported by the Washington Post. But in a statement, Lieutenant Maricat Walsh, a Navy spokeswoman, cited that measures in place that require companies to notify the government when a cyber incident has occurred that has actual or potential adverse effects on their networks that contain controlled, unclassified information. She said it would be inappropriate to discuss the further details. So let's recap for the real quick for people listening to this. They captured underwater warfare capabilities as well as excuse me. As well as surface, surface capabilities of a warship. So that means the Chinese know all your all your new technology and your old technology for your submarines. If you're on a submarine, you're fucked. If you're on a warship and you're 45 yards away from a Chinese destroyer and you can't do anything about it, if you're on the USS Donald Cook and you got Russian fighter jets with cyber warfare capabilities attached to their gun mounts, basically taking out your radars and your surface to air missiles, you're fucked. You're not ready for a war. Who you gonna go to war with?
Okay, so who is the spy that got extradited then? Was it in regards to this Navy incident, or
No,
is
that was
it
that
in
was
regards
different. That was different.
Oh, okay.
That was about economic information. That had nothing to do with the Navy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's the one I was referencing. That one.
Hmm.
Since that usually doesn't happen, and a huge crux of this trade dispute between the U.S. and China is about economic espionage. Uh, that maybe I felt like that kind of, I don't know the timeline of exactly when this extradition happened, but it looks like it was during this tariff disputes that's going on right now, past a year or 2 years. So maybe that's a form of appeasement to try to kind of end this, because China is feeling the tariff battle, more than I'm guessing they were expecting. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I know.
My bad, my bad. I was trying to unmute. All right, now repeat that one more time. I people in my ear.
All right. In regards to the spy that was, handed over to extradited to the U.S., do you think this has anything to do with either Trump's meeting with Xi in Argentina, or just as a general appeasement, so the U.S. can, back down from at least not imposing the $200 billion in tariffs that they were going to? It looks like that's on hold. Do you think that has anything to do with the spy?
I would have to say yes because if China never extradited a Chinese spy to America in history, now they do it, and the situations that are surrounding them doing it is the tariffs. Right now, we're on a 90-day hiatus, and Trump threatening to put even more tariffs on there. China's economy, depending on which economist you listen to, is either teetering or not teetering. Um, I think it really do has something to do because they're sacrificing one person to save their. I believe their economy is teetering, so they're sacrificing one person to save their economy. If whatever they can get out the deal, let's say Xi is meeting Trump to make a backdoor deal or what the case may be, whatever they can get out the deal to keep their economy going. I think this does have something to do with it.
Hmm. I think this is America's way of just kind of getting out from these tariffs. It's actually hurting them more than it's benefiting them. I mean, although China has closed down quite a few factories and have laid off quite a few people, um, they they can withstand, the pain, right? Chinese torture, so to speak. Um, they can take it, but the United States can only take it for so far, because, especially going into the next election cycle. This may hurt Trump's chances. I mean, 2020 is not that far away. You're talking 13 months away. You got about 400 days to go. So, Scholar, Scholar Chang.
Hello, can you
Um,
guys hear me? I'm sorry, I just realized I was on mute. Okay. Yes. What'd you say, Mike?
no, we were referring to the Chinese turning
Yeah.
over
Okay.
a spy to the United
Ye-
States.
okay. Um, Personally, I think it's purely ceremonial. Um, the reason I say it's ceremonial is because the s- the spies they call the technology they quote unquote steal are not not as if I'm not mistaken, I forgot what was that piece of technology they went. Well, I forgot what was they trying to spy on that wasn't as critical as the other one. The the fact that the spice and also I just want to add also another dimension is that I think it was you or uh, anti gravity whoever mentioned about the 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 fact that Chinese sacrifice individual for the greater good. Well, I mean,
that has always been established from historically. That China has always been a collectivist country where individual life was not being valued and so forth. So yeah, I'm not surprised if they would sacrifice few. But as for significance of that as appeasement, absolutely not. I really don't think that's considered appeasement. Now, what I would say is this is more of a ceremonial adjustment to basically to give the United States, especially the federal government, a way to enhance the images. So it's more of a public relation scheme than anything else. And also, I do want to mention this since we talk about the Chinese spy. This also dovetail with the I don't know if you guys noticed that this recently this there was this bill being introduced by Ted Cruz called the Foreign International. I think it was a Foreign Terrorist Intellect. Have you guys heard of that Foreign Terrorist Act? They're trying to introduce that, in which the FBI and the FBI will be allowed to compile a list of quote unquote foreign threat in American higher education
Oh yeah,
institutions.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So this dovetail very suspiciously next to each other in terms of the timing. So I wonder if China use this as a way to, like I say, necessarily, like I say, definitely not appeasement, but to maneuver maneuver the U.S. in terms of uh, resolving this whole espionage issue, or was this in a reaction, to the this piece of legislation? Because if that piece of legislation was passed, we know who the top national they're going to target. They're not going to target any of those national who has close relation tie with the United States. They're gonna target the people like, for example, who are considered adversarial to United States interests, like in China, why Russia, or any of the
Or they
countries
can
not
blame
considered.
anybody. They can blame anybody.
Yeah, yeah, they could. But my point is that but the main target is not going to be those countries with the close tie to the United States. Like for example, they're not going to target any German student coming to the United States and higher
No.
education. You see my point? So I think this. I wonder if there's a link between this and the whole Chinese spy situation, because usually when we talk about espionage, it usually occurs at the higher education. We talk about critical technology. In the security part. So that's why. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I mean they'll go after what they consider to be their adversaries or people who are not friendly to the United States. And they may just say, oh well, Scholar Chang, he was on a hangout talking about geopolitics, so therefore we have to put him under suspicion. Take away his passport or something like that. Can't fly anywhere.
Yeah, that actually goes into another thing. Uh, during the '60s, the U.S., the FBI under Hoover, they were compiling a list of professors, who they considered, could be enemies of the state, so to speak, in regards to communism. They're possible communists. And I think this was from the New York Times. I read it a couple of years ago that they were starting to do that again with American professors. I don't know if you guys heard about this.
Well, yeah, they did that to most black people, right? Called black people communists and stuff like that, and called Martin Luther King
Yeah,
communist.
yeah. Yeah. So I hope this is not a sec. I hope it's not the emergence of a second Red Scare. I won't call it McCarthyism because McCarthy is already there. I hope it's not the emergence of a second Red Scare.
No, I meant they're doing that
First.
again. This time not under the guise of the Red Scare, but
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
under a
Go ahead.
different name, either anti-American or whatever. I forget what they were calling it, but they were compiling a list of
Anti-patriot.
of adversarial American professors.
Yeah. And you know what's funny is that
You know what's funny? They're not. You know what? They're not gonna go after the actual quote unquote those self-proclaimed those liberal professors that that you see in the university. Those quote unquote social democratic socialists. Those quote unquote radical political. Those political agitator professors. They're not go after those because they know those are just a bunch of wingbacks. They're gonna go after the professor who actually has critical tire in the STEM field. So in other words, I think they're not gonna target those professors who in the social science and humanities field as much they would target professors. If they were to do it, I'm saying if they were to do it, they're not gonna target those professors in the political science in the political science field, but in the like I said in the STEM research field.
Hmm. Hmm.
Do you see my? Do you guys see my point? Do you see
Yeah,
the
yeah,
irony? The irony behind it. The irony. They're not gonna go after the actual communists. That's what I'm saying. They're not gonna go after actual self-proclaimed communists, but they're gonna go after the people who has access to the sensitive information. That's what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. I see your point. Complex, you have anything you want to add? All right. We'll switch gears real quick. Uh, George Bush Senior, the passing. What do you guys think?
Um.
Um,
Well, most people say, "Oh, I'm sorry, anti-gravity." About to say something. Sorry. Go ahead. My bad. My bad.
oh no, go ahead. I'll go after you. I'll go after you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm you myself. Um. We all know that his legacy is mixed, right? But interesting enough, right? Interesting enough, what's the strongest voice of opposition against this George Bush Senior right now? Is the what? The LGBTQ community. You notice that he has a mixed legacy in different arena, but yet for whatever reason, the opposition from the LGBTQ dominate the mainstream media. So this whole concept of media bias really, really shown in this. He has a mixed legacy in a lot of different arenas, but yet somehow this issue in the LGBT community is the one that dominates the mainstream media. That's why I never. That's the part I never understand. He has mixed legacy
Well,
in
the
war.
reason for if I could just briefly talk about that, the reason for the LGBT community is because the Pappy Bush, senior one, he him along with Reagan during the AIDS crisis, they, I guess you would say, were very discriminatory towards the LGBT community. When they saw that a lot of the people being affected by AIDS were either gay people and then later on black people. He didn't provide any kind of medical funding, or declared it a national crisis, or in any way took action towards it. So the LGBT community holds a huge grudge against him. So that's kind of
Yeah,
why that was a big issue.
yeah. Eh,
Lionel, you have anything you want to add?
well, I just want to. I also want to say though, I agree with you completely. He has done a horrible job, but he also done a horrible job in terms of the the pop the if I'm not mistaken, under the Reagan era, right? Under the Reagan era, some of the social welfare program, believe it or not, actually expanded. But I think it was hard. I think it was either the Social Security or one of the welfare program. I don't remember, was actually expanded briefly, but they was under the George Senior Bush era that started actual quote unquote the welfare quote unquote welfare reform that eventually finalized under Clinton. The whole welfare reform actually started in the senior Bush Senior. So, but yet somehow his mixed legacy in the economic realm is not being mentioned. You know, um, and also in regards to AIDS, the whole AIDS policy. You know, he was equally indifferent to the AIDS patients who are heterosexual as much as he's indifferent to the patients who are who are in the LGBT community.
But the fact that the mainstream media only focus exclusively on the LGBT community just makes me really question why his legacy is not being ex- explained upon as in detail as much as it should be. That's all.
Well,
I don't
he was also anti-Israel. So go ahead, Lino.
I don't have
Yeah.
any comments about it.
Yeah, he'll get an aircraft carrier made after him.
Yeah, most definitely.
What was that? Anti-gravity. All right, we'll close it out then. All right, we'll close it out then. Thank you all for joining us for episode 103.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Once again, appreciate for the invitation, man.
Yes,
I'm looking forward to
yes,
joining you guys.
yeah. Stay on. Thank you all for joining us. Episode 103, and we'll be back on Friday for episode 104 for economics, and then Saturday we have our Black IT talk as well. So make sure you join us for that. So
Thank
thank you
you.
all for joining us, and we are out.